Well, good afternoon. We'll call this meeting of the Indian River County Lagoon Coalition to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Here. We could all say that, right? Mayor?
No,
here.
I didn't, my microphone wasn't on. Mayor Susan Adams?
Here.
Mayor Richard Winger?
Here.
Mayor Richard Gilmore?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, under new business, 4A, we need to select a chair and a vice chair for this new coalition.
I'd be pleased to nominate Richard Gilmore as the chair.
I'll second that.
All righty, any other nominations? Seeing none, I guess I'm the chair. And we need a vice chair. I would nominate Susan Adams.
I'll second it.
Congratulations. And we need an alternate, so.
I'll nominate Mayor Winger for that.
All right, this is easy. Our next item is to discuss or bring a motion to request a seat on the Indian River Lagoon Council.
I move we request a seat on the Indian River Lagoon Council.
I'll second that. Is there any public comment on that? Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please, Sally.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore?
Yes.
Mayor Adams?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. So Friday, day after tomorrow, I will request a seat for this board.
Have they, I know you've had some discussions with them. Have they indicated anything in relation to that request?
Generally, I had positive comments from most everybody, most of the board members. It's the county or the board attorney has said that it would have to go back to the individual commissions. So it looks like it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. So, but initially, I think we'll get a positive response. And then as it gets put on to the different Volusia, Brevard, St. Lucie, and Martin County commissions, then myself or one of us will go down and do the dance and hopefully get them to say yes. Two of the commissions, excuse me, Martin and St. Lucie have already voted initially to include Indian River County because they voted when the interlocal had Indian River County in it. The other ones had not voted yet when they pulled out. So I think for Martin and St. Lucie, we can just say, well, you've already voted to include Indian River County, and just because the county bowed out doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a seat. So all you really would be doing would be to confirming what you initially voted for. And I think that's kind of the way to proceed.
Fabulous.
Yeah, the initial formation of this probably won't gel until October 1st.
Okay.
So under meeting schedule, I would anticipate that we wouldn't meet, but maybe quarterly,
Okay.
unless there's something,
Pressing or whatnot.
pressing that comes in that we'd have to talk about.
Richard, I would kind of view it, presuming that we're granted the seat, as there are opportunities for funding or remedial action, that you would bring it back to Susan and myself,
Sure.
and then we would take it to our respective councils,
Mm-hmm.
so that we would be the conduit between, our respective governments and yourself, and you the conduit to us.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I envision it. I know once it's set up, the staff will basically run it as happens with all our cities and the MPO and everything. The staff does all the heavy lifting, but the elected body does vote on how that money is purposed out. as opportunities arise, I see that as the opportunity to say, well, hey, we have X amount of dollars available this cycle, and this is the parameters are looking for, anything that's going to help the lagoon in this regard or in this regard, stormwater treatment, wastewater treatment, fertilizer application, whatever. I mean, there's, from learning one thing from the American Assembly last year is that there's multi-levels of pollution that come in from agriculture, that come in from residential fertilizer application, comes in from, septic tanks, comes in, I mean, there's all kinds, and of course the freshwater discharges from Lake Okeechobee. So depending on where you are in the lagoon, there's a number of different sources of nutrients that flow into it that we have to address. And so there's a number of different things that could do to remediate that. Just briefly, let me quote from our interlocal agreement, and this is to address a question that arose last week at our city council meeting here. We had one dissenting vote, and the question was, it was said that our only purpose was to request a seat. So let me read from item number 6 on our interlocal. It says, the purpose of the coalition is to represent the interests of the parties, which would be our cities, and the Indian River County area by participation on the Indian River Lagoon Council. Upon approval of that body, through the coalition's designated representative, and to otherwise further the interests of the parties in the restoration and protection of the Indian River Lagoon. So as I see it, this coalition really has a dual purpose. Our first purpose is to seek representation on the Indian River Lagoon Council, which is what we're going to be doing on Friday, and or at least start the process. And number 2, to otherwise further the interests of the parties, the cities, in other words, in restoration and protection of the Indian River Lagoon. And I think the greatest value of the coalition is the cities working together on a common problem. And we see this in some of our boards already, where we have common problems and we discuss ways of how we're going to fix it. And sometimes it seems like governments are at odds. And we should all be, at least in this one thing, in the same boat, pulling in the same direction. So I think that's one of the greatest strengths of the cities, is that we can work together on some issues that are divisive in other boards. So,
Richard, do you think this document, the interlocal, is sufficient as a document for this group of 3 of us representing our government, or do we need in some form to a 2 or 3 page bylaws? And I also address that to attorney who's present.
Mr. Ginsburg, could you help us with that?
Well, I think certainly as I view it, the initial responsibility of this coalition is to get membership on the
Indian River Lagoon Council.
Council, right. I get coalition and council mixed up sometimes. But that's got to be the main emphasis. To go beyond that, I view it, and I haven't checked, and maybe I should have called your respective city attorneys. I'm just here because if this had been in Fellsmere, I wouldn't be here. I'm here because your meeting was here, and I felt I should be here. I think the other responsibilities essentially are to look, assuming you get a seat on the council, to be prepared to discuss what should be the position of the council representative. I have no idea what the agenda will be for the council down the road, but it may very well be that the person selected to represent this coalition will bring back the agenda, and this board could meet and determine what it is they want to support or add to or whatever. Along those lines, To go beyond that, you do have, I mean, Sebastian has a Natural Resources Board, and I don't know if Fellsmere has something similar or the city of Vero Beach has something similar. There are city boards that are dealing with issues like this, or at least that's part of what they look at. We also have a Parks and Rec, which I think would have a little lesser responsibility for the lagoon, but would still be interested in lagoon issues. So we have two citizens boards that could also inform you as to what they think about issues on that agenda. That's how I view it. I'll leave it at that for now.
The reason I asked the question is that our city attorney gave me the bylaws of the Treasure Coast Regional League of Cities, and they're 8 pages long, and just as a blueprint. And I think it could be put off until such time as we were granted a seat. And I think any one of our city attorneys could do it. We'd be willing to do it. And it would incorporate paragraph 6 as one of the whereases, as an example. In fact, a great amount of what we would need is in here. But I think it probably would be useful to, to commit it to 3 or 4 pages of paper, what our responsibilities and constraints are and what our purpose is. And I think it could well, like I say, if we're not granted a seat, it's a waste of time, but I would hope that we would be, and at that point in time, I would think that we would probably need 3 or 4 pages of verbiage, saying how we dissolve, what our purpose is, who the officers are, which we know many of these things from the interlocal. But I would think we'd need something behind. Vero Beach actually doesn't have anyone that works in the environment. We have I'm changing the subject here, a utilities commission, and we have a planning and zoning, but we really do not have any parallel organization whatsoever. So, I mean, we would, in one sense, we would be filling that function. This group of 3, whoever's on this group of 3 would be filling that function for Vero Beach. I don't know that we need any more boards. We've got 12 or 14 as it is.
Sure.
So I would, I'd make the proposal that at such time as we're granted a seat, that one of us be elected, and then we come back and meet again and present a draft document, which would then have to go back to our respective city councils after we ourselves had edited it.
I'm not so sure if because it says in here that the bylaws, it says organization under 5, the coalition shall be a corporation not for profit and shall adopt bylaws designating the officers of the coalition and providing for the conduct of its business. The coalition shall take all other action necessary or required by law for its formation. I mean, once the paperwork on this is filed, which I guess will be tomorrow, Friday, Sally? Once this is filed, then we are kind of a separate entity, are we not, Mr. Ginsburg? I don't know.
That is a difficult question. I talked to
It's a definite maybe then.
Pardon?
Definite maybe?
Yeah, it's a definite maybe. I talked to Wayne Comment earlier, not in preparation of this meeting, but I would say in the last couple of months when we were getting our individual councils to look at forming a coalition. And what you read is talking about a corporation not for profit as part of the state law, the way they look at interlocal agreements and so forth, and the particular section we're going under at this point. And I believe, and I'll check with Wayne again, I believe we came to the conclusion we didn't have to do those things, that once we formed the coalition, that served the purpose, that substantially complied with the statutory requirement, and that we weren't going to go through a whole rigmarole getting a separate corporation, then having to meet all the requirements of a nonprofit, and then filing each year, and then, and so forth. But I'll check with him again and make sure, because this document was prepared mostly by him.
Yeah, I think he envisions that if the paragraph 5 that you read, the coalition shall be a corporation not for profit and shall adopt bylaws. It's the word bylaws. And I think he envisions that we have 3 or 4 pages. That would be the end of it.
Yeah, I have
as
less
bylaws.
concern with the bylaws than with the actual.
Yeah.
That would be the end of it. There would be nothing beyond that.
I see that there's probably good, value in that, and.
That's all.
And certainly, I don't think we need to do that until we get the seat.
That
But
could be on your agenda.
we can
at
put
that
that on,
time.
sure. So I think we have consensus there.
Yeah, and I would assume that the respective city attorneys would have sample or suggested bylaws that could be adopted.
We'll get together.
Rather quickly at the time that becomes needed.
Speaking for Vero Beach, you're familiar, I think, with what we're doing with the step system, which is well underway. Yesterday, we selected a firm to be our I'm looking for the word, to guide us in establishing a stormwater utility, which we badly needed for a period of time. We have a real problem there. We have 37% of our outflows are baffled at this point in time. Our current plan, if we actually were able to put $400,000 to $600,000 in it a year, last year we only put 100, would take us 19 years to get to 67%. So we have a rather monumental problem in stemming the outflow coming off the streets and yards and so on that you mentioned. One of the things I think we could use help with is, as there are grants, we do have currently a grant for McCamish in Old Town, which is a grant for 1/3. It's about $250,000. That's not a right number, but it's close. We have to come up with the other $500,000 to do the remedial action needed in that neighborhood. But that's one of the things we really need is if there are programs or grants available from the city that our stormwater utility, we have in Monty Falls and so on, his staff, we have the people, but what we need to do is, have the position power and the awareness of what's available, because we need significant help, and I think it'll make a difference. I think it'll make a big difference in the lagoon, So we're hoping, it depends upon whether we get the whole thing established or not, the stormwater utility, by thing I mean, and it depends on, how it's established and what kind of funding it has. But, the goal has been to get to the 67% in 5 years rather than 19 years, which I think would help a lot. What we envision doing is taking all the drains in the city and little by little, rather than having open drains that require a baffle box at the river, type 1 or 2, as the case may be. What we envision doing is putting down a material or a mat, rather large, in the street, and effectively all the water would go through it. Any overflow in a hurricane or such would get around it, of course. And the idea of that is it's made out of rubber and asphalt composite material, but the idea of it would be that we could use our street sweeper to do the work, a lot of the work, at least 90% of the work of the baffle boxes. But boy, it's going to cost a fortune with the stormwater system we have. This is probably true of both other cities, but we have some of our infrastructure is 1920s, quite frankly. So we have some rather major problems. We've gotten the biggest outfalls, the ones that are 16 inches or bigger, and that may not be a right number, but it's close. But we have a long, long, long way to go, and I think it'll make a material difference with what we're doing with the step system, and trying to work our way out of septic tanks.
Sure.
So that's, what we hope to gain is is clout to be able to help us get funding and help get funding, and expert advice to help us, to move forward on cleaning up the outfall problem. We have a very definite problem. You two are ahead of us, of course, quite a bit.
Well, the thing of it is, it's so expensive to put those baffle boxes in, the third generation baffle boxes, which actually take out the chemicals and stuff, are not cheap. And, we've put in 3 or 4, but we still have 3 or 4 or 5 yet to put in. And had we known that there was going to be money left over in this last cycle of the NEP, we would have requested money for a baffle box in addition to the money that we requested for the oyster mats. So as it turned out, we got money for oyster mats, which we're going to proceed with. But had we known, we could have put in for the baffle box, got funded on that too, because that just went begging.
So we're counting on you, Richard, to alert Susan and myself and our respective governments that we need to put in for that. That's what we're hoping to get.
Well, and I think a lot of that is just staying on top of it and knowing when the triggers are that you have to, I think everybody probably got the email as to what was available, but unless there's that personal contact, hey, did you put in for it? There's X amount we're coming up on the end of the cycle. This has got to go in by, February or March or whenever the due date is. Then that triggers something on each council, and then you direct staff, hey, have we got any projects that would line up with what the grant cycle is? And if you don't ask, you don't get. So at this point, I'd like to discuss citizen advisory boards. I know Ruth Stambridge is here, a county historian, and she had said that she was interested in it. Ruth, do you want to come up and say something to us?
Well, good afternoon. I didn't plan on speaking, but I think it's very, very important that we continue with cleaning up that lagoon. When I was county commissioner way long time ago, that was our goal. In fact, I think Susan's mom coined the thing of, I was the stormwater queen, because once you get immersed in this, you can't let it go, because you see how very important it is if we're going to keep that lagoon clean. And as far as the citizens group, I think you have a lot of talent out in this county, not only in your cities, but throughout the county. Mm-hmm. And if the county government opts to opt out, then I think your citizens who live in the county, the unincorporated county, would step forth if you put forth a citizens group. And as I said, there's a lot of scientists, retired and active, and I 35 years with the state of Florida in an environmental field, and there are a lot of us out there in all sorts of fields that would step forth to help you out. Mm-hmm. So that was my 2 cents worth.
Well, that's quite a bit more than 2 cents.
And also,
appreciate it too.
Be sure to go back in history, because if you don't start at the very beginning in your 20s in the Indian River Farms Drainage District down in that part of the county, the St. John's out in the Fellsmere area, the old central the water control districts, and then what the central and southern Florida water management district, which ended up being South Florida, what they did in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and even when I came out of college in the 60s, they were cutting ditches and moving water like the Kissimmee River. They tried to do it for the St. John. So you have to go back and start from there to see where you were and how you move forward. So I'd advise you to definitely look at your history.
So we should go back to the future then.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's right. That is our future. Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know I talked with the interim director, Maurice Sterling, and they're going, right now, they had citizen advisory boards for the NEP. And the intent is to also have a Citizens Advisory Board for the Indian River Lagoon Council. So he said, well, make sure that you have people in your community that you could put forward for that board. So I think that's one thing that we can think about, and we could actually have a Citizen Advisory Board that would assist us as well.
So would you like for us to put together maybe a short list of some people in the community that might be willing or good candidates to serve on that type of a Citizens Advisory Board, so we can maybe not put it together at this point until we get a seat, but at least have something ready to go?
It might be a little premature here now, but for hopefully when we do get a seat, if they do form a Citizen Advisory Board, then it would be good to have folks from Indian River County on that board.
Yeah, I can think of several people, as you can too, that have expertise in the lagoon that might be available. I would be thinking about those that, bring us some past experience or involvement, as the case may be.
I would assume at our next meeting, we'll probably know more about our seats and the status of getting that seat on the coalition. And at that point, maybe we can have a further discussion about the Citizens Advisory Board.
Sure. Do you want to set a date for the next meeting? Now, we might as well.
Sure. Do you want, I know you said quarterly, but do you want something sooner depending upon, since you have the meeting on Friday, or? I'm pretty flexible, honestly, so.
I don't think we're going to really know a whole lot after Friday. We're going to kind of, maybe the initial vibe of how everybody feels, but if it has to go back to each commission,
We probably won't know something for several months then.
yeah, I would say maybe if we want to do something late July or first part of August or something like that, we could probably, there's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 meetings. I think they're trying to do it every other week,
Okay.
every 2 weeks until everything is formed and they hire staff and everything.
Well, why don't we aim for the end of July, beginning of August then,
Okay.
sometime, if that works for you guys?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, of course, during the summer we truncate, but when is the first Tuesday in August?
Well, the first Tuesday in August would be the 4th.
So, I mean, if you wanted to do it on Monday the 3rd, whatever we decided, I could take the city council on the 4th. Susan, when is your city council?
The first and third Thursdays.
It's when?
The first and third Thursdays.
Okay, so
the
you
next
could,
one would
when
be the
is your
6th.
city council, Richard?
The 2nd and the 4th Wednesdays.
Okay, so I would suggest Monday the 3rd.
The 3rd.
because
Monday the 3rd?
Because what I'm thinking is that anything that we talk about, then I would want to bring forward as quickly as possible
Sure.
to the council, our city council.
Okay. So the next meeting would be the 3rd of August? What time, 3 p.m., does that work for you?
3 p.m. works fine for
all right?
me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mayor Winger? Okay, at 3 p.m. on the 3rd.
As far as the Citizens Advisory Board, if we were to get the right people, such a group could do a lot of our real work.
I'm all for delegation. I think so, yeah. I mean, they would have the expertise and be able to recommend some things to us, I would think. If there is anything vitally important, I can
Yes.
let you know, and we can meet before then. But otherwise, I can't see us meeting much more than quarterly, except when the grant cycle gets close by. And then, the October 1st is when they're hoping to get everything formed. So they're hoping to get everything formed by October 1st, and that would be, I guess, when the money is due, as I understand it. So, I mean, at this point right now, there's no money in the coffers. They're operating through St. John's. They're going to continue operating through St. John's. They've put an RFP out for a director and other staff people. So it's being run in-house now by St. John's, as it has been, with the difference is the directors, the council is directing that staff instead of St. John's. So it's very interesting to see this all come together, and hopefully that what they're hoping for, I guess, is that the more money going in there can leverage more money, and, you know, there can be lobbying efforts by not only the members of the board, but also the members of the commissions and members of the cities that are involved, to try to get more money flowing from the state, from the federal government, from county governments, because it's going to be a generational problem that we're going to be faced with. This is not something that's going to be a quick fix or a cheap fix.
Yeah, I currently represent the city on the Energy and Environmental Commission of the Florida League of Cities. I don't know whether there's a fit there or not, but anyway.
Sure, could very well be. At this time, is item number 5 says public comment. Is there any public comment?
Where is the meeting on Friday?
It's at the Palm Bay Center in the St. John's. Yeah, it's up, in Palm Bay.
It's right there by, what is it, Eastern State
Yeah,
College?
9:30. This coming Friday the 5th. Yes, sir. Seeing no other comment, any members' matters?
We'll have some sort of minutes for this,
Mhm.
and you'll send them to Mrs. Bach.
I'll send you the draft as soon as it's done, probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Anything else? I guess it would be time to look for adjournment then.
Do you want a motion?
Sure, I'll have a motion.
I move we adjourn.
That is always a good motion.